From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battle on the land, in air and sea. First to fight. Kiedyś nie było in air, wiadomo, bo to jest XVIII-wieczna formacja i XIX-wieczny hymn. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to speak only in English, so we are speaking only in English. So, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles on the land and on the sea. First to fight for right and freedom and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. So, as promised, I'm here as the American Marine. As you probably know, Marine Corps was called into existence in the last part of the 18th century, but the famous anthem from the halls of Montezuma just sang was created. I don't remember the composer. It was created in the 19th century, in the second half of 19th century. So obviously we have no in the air or something, because they have put this part, we fight our country's battles on the land and on the sea, but they also put in the middle of that also this part about air. And I don't remember how it's exactly it went from this moment on, because now they are obviously singing also about air, although the Marine Corps has not so much to do with air fighting, but still they felt it was necessary to put this element too. Yeah. So when I'm doing something in the English language, then it's always the problem which accent to pick. I don't have this problem with Spanish, because Spanish is much less known to me a language. And in the same time, I know only European Spanish. I don't know really the Mexican Spanish, the Mexican type of Spanish. So it's a very easy choice then. But with English, it's a totally different matter. Well, as since I'm dressed in this uniform, I can say something about it before you form any questions of your own, because this is really a time for you to pose a question. So free will. Okay, so about voluntarism. Okay, in a moment, but God bless America. Yes, you are that right, sir. So these uniforms were used by the Marine Corps in Iraq in 2003. Before it was the other. This type of uniform is called free desert color, because it consists of three colors: this browny something, this sandy something, and the lighter one. And before there were uniforms called six desert colors, which were not very effective, because they also consisted of some small blackish fragments, and those blackish fragments tend to be very impractical in relation to the sun and so on. So after some using it, they have decided to get rid of this all the type of uniform, and which was called six desert colors, and it was frequently used by the U.S. Marine Corps during the first war in the Persian Gulf. But later on, they've decided that they will give those uniforms to their satellites, to their allies, and it ended up in the Iraqi army, the democratic Iraqi army, after the liberation of Iraq from Saddam Hussein regime. And Saddam Hussein's regime on Saddam Hussein and his regime. So, hello. And so, okay, so, yeah, that would be it about the uniforms. How long can I talk about uniforms? It's not, this is supposed to be some kind of engineer. I am not sure. I don't really remember. So that it was something to do with engineering stuff. So, okay, so, What's my opinion on free will? The most interesting thought formulated on free will, it would be, in my humble opinion, the opinion that was formed by Baron d'Holbach. D'Holbach was, maybe you have found already my film about him. His real name was Dietrich something something, and he Dietrich Paul something, and he changed it totally because he was really a German, but he was living all his mature life in all his grown-up life in Paris, and he was doing a career of a philosopher in France, and he changed this Dietrich part of his name into Thierry. So he became a Paul Thierry d'Holbach, and he was always a Freiherr, that it means the Baron. So he was Baron Paul Thierry d'Holbach, but he is most commonly known as simply d'Holbach, although many people think that it should be pronounced d'Holbach. Now it should not be pronounced like that. It should be pronounced d'Holbach, because it was a name that was formed for him in his French version of his name. So yeah, and he has thought much about the free will and the existence of free will, and how can we perceive this problem, how we can approach this problem. So it's not a worry for you. You shouldn't be worrying about that. I should be worrying, because you can pose me a question using some translator of some sort, and I will be, struggling to answer it. So it's not your problem, really. It's my problem. So okay, keep calm. Okay, so about the free will, d'Holbach has said very interesting question. He said that we should approach to the people, to the humankind, as if the free will existed anyway, even if it does not exist. So it seems that, yes, maybe in some foreseeable future, we'll be able to find out what really causes our actions, and how these actions really start, and how much we are determined by this objective causes of our behavior. But we still cannot really perceive humans as being totally devoid, being totally deprived of free will. We cannot really think about humans as people who are without free will, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to put in action any kind of legal system that requires us to punish and to evaluate people's behavior, people's actions, and to punish, because the punishment would make no sense, right, without free will, because you would be like forced by nature to do something. And some of philosophers were really doing and were really thinking this way, and they were thinking, they were presenting this problem as if it were some sort of trap, that people are bound to do bad stuff, and you cannot really punish them. So Baron d'Holbach, he has said that yes, it seems that people are devoid of free will. They have possessed none, right? But still, we are forced by the rules of civilization, by the rules of law, by the rules of human society, that we are, we have to act as if people still possessed free will. So as long as this is, as far as it's a very interesting philosophical question, in my part of the field, in my scientific domain, where as far as history and political science are real sciences, they are not, they are partly sciences, but in my domains, approach people as if they had free will, even if they don't possess one. So I hope I said something interesting about free will. So from historical and political point of view, it doesn't really matter if people are given with free will. we have to treat them as if they were given free will, right? Okay, so I hope I said something interesting, which is basically my intention here during our talks, to say something interesting and maybe not so obvious, right, during those talks. Okay, what's the next question? Is it correct to speak of enlightenment absolutism as a political system? Level of enlightenment depends very much on the views of the king, which is independent from the political system. Yes, but like classical absolutism, when you take the kings which were totally convinced that they are given, that they are given with their rights, they given with the power by God, right? So they also were I never could really pronounce the word. So there were different variants of this classical absolutism too. This is what I was just trying to say. And they, we see that it varies, right, from king to king. That the approach to God-given rights is also different. So when Stanislas, you say that correctly, that enlightened absolutism, maybe it's a little bit problematic to for us to define, because the level of enlightenment and enlightened thoughts are different from one ruler to another, and that's totally right. It's absolutely correct. But we have a problem with classical monarchs too. Those monarchs who are absolutely convinced that the only source of their power is God and God's will. They also varied from one to another. So this, when we say, for instance, when we speak about democracy, it's the same. Democracies also vary from vary. They are different, right? Based on the culture, the local culture, and so on. Okay, so it's not really a problem for this particular type of political culture, enlightened absolutism. It's not a problem. The Americans and the British often use a term enlightened despotism. It's not really the same, but given that the Anglo-Saxon peoples usually tend to be more proto-democratic in those times than despotism, which is characteristic for Turkey or maybe Russia, was a little bit, it was could form for them, for the Anglo-Saxon, it could form different type of the same approach. Whereas here in the continental Europe, we tend to distinguish between the normal monarchs like Louis XIV, despite all his tyrannical approaches from time to time, from to distinguish him from, for instance, Turkish sultans and Russian tsars, right? So it's not quite the same, but still, the Anglo-Saxons often use this term enlightened despotism also. No one talks about enlightened democracy because we know for a fact that there is a part of enlightenment also in democracy. It should be, at least. Jefferson have said, for instance, that the democracy can only exist and prosper when you have a well-informed society. And we can, it was one of the starting points from which the 19th century philosophers and different politicians in Europe, they thought that maybe it would be a better approach to do something that Cromwell did in 17th century England, when there was this short period of time when England was a republic. They have decided that only people who possess their own houses should be voting, because those people are to some extent free of financial worries, and they concentrate on forming their political opinions. So well-informed society, right? And because besides, democracy is based on majority, not enlightenment, right? But it could be, and there were many approaches to that. So we also have different types of democracies. We have just the most generous version of democracy nowadays, but it's not. It was not always the case. It's not typical in the long run. Okay. What's it's the favorite word? Hula baloo. Cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac. It's a French word. It means ass of bag. I don't remember. It was supposed to be some idiom. I don't remember what it was in French, and I also don't remember what it was supposed to mean in English. Dragon zone. Maybe you will explain to me or remind it to me. But it's definitely a French word. Cul is the ass, and sac is, well, sack or bag. Well, I am a little bit skeptical about cryptocurrency because, well, I am not engaged in it. I don't remember. I don't understand really these Bitcoin things, these cryptocurrency things, and all this tendency to put money and different sorts of money, different forms of money into the internet and make it all cyber, right? So I see only one advantage of this approach. That would be that the political authorities worldwide would have better access to control our the whole flow of money through societies or from one society to another, and they also will be maybe conceivably they will be able to totally ban the gray area of economy. But from the point of view of an individual citizen, individual person, I think it's no deal, not a good deal. Ancient Israel and its beliefs, it's inseparably connected to ancient Egypt beliefs and its mythology. I don't think so. I don't think so at all, that it's inseparably linked to ancient Egypt, because the ancient Israelis, the ancient Jews, they had a very strong tendency to the kind of behavior which would be a little bit similar to the ancient Indians from India. And then in ancient Hindus, they were also putting into the society many rules which were sometimes very cruel taboos, and when you broke it, that was considered a very big mistake, and so on. So, for instance, if you cast some shadow in ancient India, when you cast some shadow on the people who are your betters, when they are higher in the society, then it's your very big problem. Sometimes it was punished by death. So in ancient Israelis had a very similar tabooistic approach. So it's not very similar to Egyptians. Egyptians were far less. I think the Egyptians were far less strict, although we may be tending to think differently, because we associate the ancient Judea with freedom, because it was only one God, not so many gods, and this room for taboos was one would think smaller, but it wasn't the case. So no, it was not similar to Egyptian style. No, Stoicism, no, not at all. Buddhism, no. Taoism and Epicureanism, yes, to some extent. Yes, Taoism is, well, compelling to me, because it's about the appreciating of the way of the process of becoming, and it's very constructive way of thinking when you think about it. Taoism, it's really something when you can also concentrate on the process when you are becoming something, when you are doing something, and more concentrating even on the way than on the right way than even on the target or on the destination of your route. Epicureanism is often depicted as if it was all about sex and bodily pleasures, and it was not the case. Epicures have said that the more important and more satisfying are the pleasures of the mind. So it was not at all, but it was many times lampooned by Stoics and by Christians. So now we tend to think that it was something wrong with Epicurus' thought, but it wasn't the case. I think it's very, very good, very good thinking. Well, I'm so much concentrated on my very specific way of thinking. I would say to you, I can give you one advice. That was because I think that although my academic success was not always something as I wished it to be, not to the highest extent which I would ask for, which I would like to achieve, not always to the fullest of my dreams or something, but still it's very important to find somebody's to find one's niche, one's domain, and not to be distracted by the other people's wishes, by grants, by contemporary tendencies of society that something will pay off better than something else. No, it will not. It will not. You just stick to the things that you are interested in, and it pays off. It paid off even for me, even if I did not achieve as much, fame as I would think it would happen. I was thinking more about Japanese because I have a really big problem with the Chinese, as you know. I think that they have created. I mean, continental China, of course. I do not mean here Hong Kong or Singapore is also a very authoritarian, very unpleasant regime. But still, when put next to communist China, that it's maybe a smiley one. But still, I was thinking about Japanese more, because I really respect the Japanese. They have really created something completely unmatched by others, by other cultures. They have made themselves Westerners without losing their background culture. It's a nation with two cultures, so it's amazing. Usually, you have to choose, right? So. Cul-de-sac, yes. Well, it would make sense because cul-de-sac, it's the bottom, the cul as being an ass, a buttocks, and a posterior, could also mean end, the dead end, right? So yes, it makes perfect sense, right? So when you reach with your hand to the sack, then was some other question above. How many subscribers do you have abroad? I have no idea. I never counted it. I don't even know how to count it. That would be a crypto commercial, but rats. I really like this. Yeah. Well, Klaus Schwab, it's one of the people who are in charge of this operation, which will be, we will be forced to make one day. Then how to move back all the industry to Europe and how to make it less problematic for the environment and so on. So he Schwab, I think he's right when he says about the machines which would replace most of the physical work that is done today by people, and by doing so, it will reduce the cost of production here in Europe again, and the outsourcing of the whole factories and searching worldwide for the for cheaper work power will not be needed anymore. Right. So he is doing the right thing, but for us who are only putting together Germany's machines and German machines, that could be a little bit problematic, because those factories that are, for instance, in the proximity of Poznań or Wrocław, today they can move back in this process back to Düsseldorf or something. So it could be problematic for us, but on the whole, it would be good for Europe. Well, I would say that the biggest amount of aggressive behavior in contemporary Europe are from the side of environmentalists and perhaps even vegans. So maybe it would be something like this. They are still, attacking some industrial complexes, some industrial plants. I mean, for nuclear power plants, they are protesting those, and although they are best for the environment, but they seem not to understand it. Maybe they think that in futures Europe will have the exact same amount of earthquakes as the Japanese today have. So they are very aggressive, and I would say the most aggressive people in contemporary Europe, being the inborn Europeans, would be environmentalists. So, but I don't think that they are organized as well to the extent that would enable them to really do something comparable to what you were mentioning, Elliot. Yeah, I know. Yes, I am a supporter of enlightened absolutism, but I know that it could be limited, really. Well, the putting it into reality could be limited to a small group of really sophisticated thinkers, which were also effective rulers, like Frederick the Great, or to lesser extent, Gustav III of Sweden or Joseph II of Austria. I know that, yes, that's problematic. But when you think which political system is the best, I am convinced that enlightened absolutism is by far the best, because it's the whole idea of enlightened absolutism is that freedom is also good for the monarchy and for the monarch himself or herself. So, and when the monarch is really understanding it, not in the style of Catherine the Great, because Catherine the Great was more pretending to be enlightened that she really was. Yes, but it's also the same with democracy. I would say democracy is good when somebody like Trump or Boris Johnson is in charge. But when somebody else is in charge, then we have, democracy is an incredible waste of energy. All those quarrels between people who have, normally little or nothing to say about the final results of the political struggle, right? Like normal electors. And most of the electors, of the voters, are really not very familiar with the political reality. So it's a huge waste of energy. I think it's a terrible idea. The Ziemkiewicz's idea. He has many terrible ideas. I appreciate what he's saying about the contemporary nowadays maybe it would be better term nowadays um, tendencies of European Union to regulate everything. Then I respect his opinions. But when he proposes really something, then I'm not very convinced about it usually. And I make no secret about it. I also put some comments under his clips, but I don't think he puts much attention. He pays much attention to those. Well, I'm sure that Jesus Christ could have existed as a religious ruler, but a religious leader, I mean. But well, it's absolutely have no meaning for me. I understand that our, contemporary life is based to some extent on Christianity and Christian virtues, but I'm also convinced that most of our virtues are Greek Roman. So there's the tragedy of Islam that it was based on the culture of Babylon, and they never have continued any of those ideas, really. Well, China already stopped to develop as quickly as it used to develop, but it's still considerable, and we will see. If the whole body of the West would act together against the Chinese, then the Chinese wouldn't stand a chance. But but we see that France, Germany, and others are convinced that it's impossible to beat China in trade, in economy, and so on, and they are more trying to convince the United States to trade with China, to find some common ground. And I fear that it's blind man's talking. But we'll see. You said that monotheistic religions are fiercer in spreading their polytheistic than polytheistic. Yeah. Well, Christianity conquered Roman Empire to some extent by accident, because Constantine adopted this religion, and because there were also some other monotheistic or close to monotheism kinds of religions that appeared in the late ancient Rome, like the cult of Solis Invicti, the unconquerable sun, the cult of Isidar, the cult of or Isid, I don't know how it is in English, Isidar. Some Ahura Mazda of Persia. So yeah, so it was a little bit by accident that it turned out to be Christianity that reappeared victorious from this struggle. So I think we are all under the influence of this church-centered way of thinking about it, that it was some kind of quest that was bound to finish with success. I think Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity are by no means monotheistic. They are saints. There are saints in those religions. Of course, there are also saints in the Protestants never say that the saints are not welcome in Christianity, but they don't treat them as semi-gods. They treat them as some sort of role models. And whereas in Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity, you really treat them as gods, as additional auxiliary gods. So I don't think, I think only Protestantism is monotheistic, and maybe some sorts of Judaism also, because maybe you know, maybe not, Judaism is divided into some 5,000 or something like this, 4,000, 5,000 sects. So some of those sects are just like Protestantism in this respect, that they are very monotheistic, and some are more similar to Catholic approach. Okay, I can read the questions. Okay. Sometimes I will not read some words because you are putting some words which would be deadly to the to the how it's the range of ideas, how it's called somehow in here in the YouTube town, that I don't remember the term. The topic is Przemysław. What's the topic of the current live streaming? There is no topic. You ask me questions in English, and I try to the best of my abilities, to answer them. Do you think Israel is the Western culture world agent in the Middle East, or just relatively independent country? Well, this is a tricky question, because culture is something different than politics, and very often. And culturally, Israel is a Western country, but is it independent politically? Well, it's not so easy to answer. Is any country independent today? There are international organizations. There are many links, economic links from one country to another. It's really hard to say if any country is really independent. I think they are depending on the United States as far as military things are concerned. United States is often saying, I think by courtesy, that Israel is their closest ally or something, but really their closest allies are Japan, Great Britain, and Australia, in that order, I would think. Israel is more a semi-sponsored state and a base for American soldiers, and the gate to the Middle East for American soldiers, as much as the Russia-friendly government of Assad in Syria is a gate to the Middle East for the Russians. Every country has, every powerful country that has a global ambitions have gates of this sort, and the Israelis are given in some generous amount of money, but they are forced to spend that money on American weaponry, and they have no other choice. They have to buy American weaponry. So it's also some sort of additional orders for additional military stuff from American government, and with the incentive in form of that money, and it really is paying off for the American mostly private military industrialists. So Israel is yes, depending on the United States, and if United States will one day drop the case of Israel, will abandon Israel, that was close in the time of Obama. That's why Netanyahu was so nervous, and he was visiting one time after another United States, and was plotting all the time with the Republicans, senators and representatives to, trying to stop the incoming disaster. So that was close for Israel. Have you ever used to smoke in your life? In my life, you clearly did not participate in the previous Q&As because I was once or twice already asked that. But I remember, I realized that those Q&As, they are put into this YouTube, and they are impenetrable a little bit because of the volume and count. So the answer is what I already gave there in some of the previous Q&As, but of course I also don't know myself in which it was. I smoked 3 cigarettes in my life and had a cough after that, and never really understood why it's the fun stuff. So for me it isn't. But alcohol, yes, I totally get alcohol, but not the smokies, no. I wouldn't say that Christianity is practically a solar cult, because sun is only limited to some element of the God's world, God created world, which is a step backwards from the solar cults, or like Solis Invicti of the unconquerable soul, is unconquerable sun from the last part of the ancient Roman Empire. So, but I think personally, and I also have formulated in one of my previous articles, one of my early popular articles, not the scientific ones, academic ones, but in one of my popular articles, I've presented an idea that to some extent we are all in solar cult, because, for instance, and also the solar cult is 100% rational in some way, because really if we were not delivered with in this time span of 8 minutes with the new energy from the sun, then we would freeze to death, right? Most probably, but not necessarily, but most probably. Not necessarily, because some people could have survived while living very close to the volcanoes. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. In the as far as like 3 billion years from now, because in some 3 billion years or something like this, the volcanoes will stop being so active or something. I don't really remember, but there is also some different considerations that are overlapping. So with the sun exploding and changed to the red giant, so this only can serve as a philosophical exercise, right? So I would say that the solar cults are really, to some extent, rational religions. So somebody has asked me, maybe even during this discussion, I am not sure, it was a tendency more than put really into the question, if the religion, yes, somebody of you has asked now during this discussion about the rationality of the cult of Jesus. I see none, because he was a man. If he was a god, so okay, so he claimed to be God, so that's the end of the story, believe or not. But the nuclear reactor that it's called sun, that really provides us with life on this planet, right? So the cult of potable water maybe also would be could be considered rational. Maybe we would treat it better if we considered it a cult or some deity or some small god. Yeah, but well, but sun is more cool, right? So I mean, a more powerful and so on, something that we could link to emotionally as being powerful and godlike. And water, potable water, well, it gives also life, but okay. I okay, so I read the question. The question is, Mr. Napierała, are you a proponent of opposite global idea, open society, push forward by George Soros and global forces, globalists? Yeah, well, I would be a proponent of this if not for several things. Those several things is uneven demographic growth from one country to another, uneven rules from people of different origin, like I mean the positive racism, the positive discriminatory behaviors and so on. So I think no, not in these conditions. No. I think George Soros's approach is very problematic for the world, and I think it brings more chaos to the world. But if we could really achieve, but I don't think, I think that we are kidding ourselves if we think that we could achieve that people's different nations, different cultures will have the same more or less rate of demographic growth, and some different considerations which also be evened out a little bit between nations, like the role of the women, the role of religion, what is the freedom of speech, and the culture. If the cultures could really sit at a table and really came to terms about it, and some middle ground or something like this, then I would consider being a proponent of open society, open global society, one global open society. But in these conditions we have presented today, I am not. I hope I have answered this question to your satisfaction, Mr. Halach. The English have brought China to the end to some extent with opium, and also the mixture of opium and tobacco, which was called madak, and the Chinese are very irresistant, which is very funny. They are very irresistant to opiates and to opium, to narcotics, drugs, and to gambling, which is very. So they have some problem with strong will. Maybe they have no problem with free will, having none. I mean, by the authorities, of course, they have the personal free will, but they have a real problem with being prone to dangerous substances and behaviors like gambling and drugs. My favorite town in Italy is, Mr. Elliot, is by far Venice. I think it's maybe typical, but also Firenze, Florence is also typical for people to like this city. But I am not so much impressed by Florence. So by the power of contrast, I prefer Venice. Venice is really something. I like countries I like towns. I like cities and towns which have something to the coastline and are interestingly planned and have some general style in architecture, and Venice is check, right? So all those three. So as Vienna has those, but Vienna has no sea, right? And yeah, I like I think there is something in it that in this that I prefer. Of all the cities I know, I prefer, and my favorites are Amsterdam and Venice. And Amsterdam is often called Venice of the North, which is funny because Amsterdam is only like 200, maybe 100 something younger than Venice. Venice is a relatively young, relatively new city for Italian standards. Chinese. Well, Camille, you must also remember that the Chinese were poisoned not only by British opium, but also by American opium, which was cultivated in Turkey. That's something that not many people know, but also the American and American-Turkish partnership have provided the Chinese with those opiates. I don't know if the next will be with my homie from Theatrum Illuminatum. He is from Poznan. Yes, he's actually from one of the regions which are adjacent to Poznan, but it's really Poznan in terms of communication and so on. Will this virus chaos end someday, or will it just always be the best way to control societies and the power worldwide totalitarianism by limiting our rights? I think that what really happened, it's not that the countries in the world, for instance, Western countries, as much as I know, the Thais or the Japanese used the situation to gain more control over societies. I mean, the real problem is that during the normal times, we have limited by the means of free market economy, we have limited the manpower of all the systems which are responsible for national health and national health providers, national health organizations, and so on. So when this plague attacked us, we were not able to fight it really back. So not really able to fight it back. So we had to gain additional time by putting people to homes and so on. So I think it's just the way when you are presenting it, it's more like a conspiracy theory than something that really is going on or was going on. Which agenda do you mean? You mean the climate agenda? I mean the climate agenda will not be put into reality, not wholly, not in the whole extent of this idea, of that idea. Do you think we'll have to vaccinate ourselves with next doses of this vaccine against coronavirus till the end of because of the new variants? Yes, I think that we will be forced from time to time, but I think to vaccine ourselves, yes, I think so. All is showing that all data is showing that it will be the case probably, but I think that the frequency of getting those vaccines will be less and less often, right? So not such a problem, provided that you have no problem. But those are intermuscular vaccines, so they are not, for instance, very cruel. they are not very painful and so on. Yes, I think that we will be forced to apply those, yes, from time to time. Not as often, perhaps, as now, but yes. After English, the only languages that could be really called international are in this order: Spanish, Russian, and Arabic. The Chinese have no chance, and the French would be in international language provided there were some more countries, more powerful countries that would also speak those languages, and not like, for instance, only a region, one powerful country, that is France, of course, then the one region, Quebec, in Canada, and plus some, semi-bankrupt states in Africa, which are not really sending a powerful cultural signal. So I would say the international languages, because as you probably know, in the United Nations decided already that international languages there are 6 of them, and one of them is English, Spanish, Russian, and Arabic, plus French and Mandarin Chinese. So I think that with French and Mandarin Chinese, it's a little bit of an overstatement. They are not really international languages and will never be, probably. I can also stress that in Canada, for instance, you are often expected to know also the other language a little bit, and the French-speaking Canadians, they are learning English more gladly and more broadly than the other way around. I don't like Austria because they are pretending that they are something other than Germany, but I think Switzerland is even worse because it's a mixture of 3 countries in the country versions of that, and they are based on some very suspicious bank account operations and so on. And Austria is only in denial, but it's an interesting culture, the subtype of German culture. And they are pretending to be. And I prefer Sweden to Norway. Sweden is more interesting because Sweden was an independent entity for the whole of its history, almost, whereas Norway was, for most part of the history, dominated by Denmark. And when this kingdom was called Denmark-Norway, with the link between them. And when you were like Ludwig Holberg, it was a playwright, a writer and a playwright in the 18th century. He had to move to Copenhagen to get a real chance, or real shot for the real career, because in Bergen, Norway, when he definitely lived for some time. I don't know if he was born there. It would be impossible. Mr. Doc. No, Mr. Napierała or Doc. Yeah, not Mr. Doc. Do you get some invite to any abroad universities to give some lectures? I guess a guy like you could promote Polish science. We think better than. Well, I was never doing stuff which was had something to do with promoting knowledge about Poland to the West or to other countries. So I never did it. I think about doing it, using the powers of the internet. I was doing it to some small extent. I was giving some lectures in Portugal and in Spain, and Italy. So more southern experience, but English-speaking experience, yeah. And mostly Portugal, yeah, because the private higher school that I am working for has many connections with other private universities, small universities, and institutions of this sort. And one of them was Instituto Superior de Comunicação Empresarial in Lisbon, Lisboa, why the leftist views and personal wealth positively correlated. Well, when you are free of material worries, then you can concentrate on being totally out of this world mentally, right? Totally apart from this world mentally. You can ignore the rule of building society and become a lefty. I would never say if I prefer British version of English or American version of English, because there are many in each. I like the type of American, for instance, that I am trying to now speak with now, and which is something called Massachusetts American English. Their version of general American accent, and I mostly try to do the Massachusetts, the Northern American style. Well, I also like Texan style. It's also very interesting. And North Carolina, very funny. They're more funny than the Texas. Oh, this is Texas. This is Texas. That's Texas style of communicating without the G, not communicating, but communicating. So it's fun. But and the British, well, from British accents, I only like the school accent, the received pronunciation. I am not very fond of these regional boorish sounds, like from Manchester and things like that. Liverpool, Birmingham. What are you thinking about different theory, conspiracy theory? New World Order, Illuminati, global government, the population, global. The population will be fine, but I fear nobody is really considering it. Illuminati is something, it's a total idiocy. Illuminati was a very small organization in 18th century Bavaria, and they have planned to make the city less clerical, less church dominated. And they put in action some of their ideas, but they were totally dispersed and punished, and most of them were seized and punished. They have only very limited links to northern Germany, even. Like I remember that I think that the Baron von Kniphausen was one of the very small number of the members of the Illuminati order who was not from Bavaria or southern Germany. There were theories that they are linked to Carbonari, to Italy or something the next century, but there's absolutely no proof whatsoever. So it's more like film talking and Hollywood talking. New World Order is to some extent something of a reality, because if you consider the New World Order, the rule of democracy, making the world safe for democracy, which Wilson presented and tried to realize, you can name the United Nations and think organization like this as a New World Order. Some of the people who are working for United Nations certainly have these tendencies to make themselves, to gain some more importance, political influence, and so on. And that could take form of a New World Order. But this is, I think, like we are still in the corridor. of this, and I very much doubt if, for instance, we could really form a global government, considering how big are cultural differences, and the differences between the other nations' interests, how deep are they, right? So I really doubt it. Shimon, don't worry that you are late. You can always rewind it, or how to put it. I will put this because those films are rendering very slowly, as you know. But I will put them to the playlist, and from playlist you can find it on the playlist earlier, before they are fully rendered. So you have access that is comparable to my access, author's access. So not a problem. So you can use the playlist just when this Q&A is finished, and you will have this right away. I am not sure about mandatory vaccines, but probably we will have to. Maybe we will have to do this, yes, because of these new variants of the virus. I am putting those uniforms before because A, I can, B, it's fun, 3, it's I'm speaking English language, and it's always the problem of keeping up the accent. So when I'm in American uniform, it's easier. Yeah. So there are many reasons why I put the American uniform. The three desert color. What do you think about people that identify as other nationality that they are? I mean, the British influencer who had ate many plastic surgeries to look more Korean and said he identifies as. Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about this British influencer. I think that it's normal to some extent that you feel that you are more connected sometimes to other culture than you are to your own. I feel more connected to German and Dutch and Swedish and American culture than to all those Germanic Protestant cultures, far more than I feel myself connected to Polish culture. It does not mean that I am not a patriot. I wish all the best for this country, and I even vote for the, to some extent, nationalistic party that is ruling now over Poland. So there's no contradiction here. So, but the cultural, you cannot really, you cannot really choose. You always there will be always some cultural elements that will be more complying to you, and you can do nothing about it. So if he is, if his way of thinking is more, I don't know, Confucian, he can be identifying himself as Korean very easily. And it's nothing wrong about it, unless he is, I don't know, waging war on Britain on behalf of South Korea or something like this. But it's very improbable, given that South Korea is a very normal and peace-loving country, quite contrary to their neighbor from the north. What is the biggest conspiracy theory that is actually true? I think the only conspiracy theory that is actually true, that is coming to my mind now, because the Jesuit, no, Freemasonry, no, Illuminati, no, New World Order, were only as far as United Nations and things like that are concerned, and it's far, far, far away from the target, from the result that would be something that we could really call a world order, a world government, or something like this. So it's very far away from the thing that we would call it with clear conscience. And so I think the biggest conspiracy theory that is actually true would be the total transformation of the media. I think that we also have this deepening divide between the anywheres and somewheres. Maybe you have heard about anywheres and somewheres, maybe not. Anywheres are people who are just taking the laptop and they are, one evening they are working in Singapore, and different evening they are working with in Buenos Aires, the different in then next day, next afternoon they are working in London, then in Las Vegas or something, and they are not really connected with those places. Well, they're not really connected to the country of those places. They are more connected, for instance, when you, the very distinguished historian Victor Davis Hanson, who is somehow still living in California, although he's right-winger and is a Trump supporter. Victor Davis Hanson, he has said that when he asked fellow Californians about something about London, something about Singapore, they perfectly know where to live, which hotel to pick, and so on. And when he asked them something about the less prosperous, less important towns or cities in the California itself, like Bakersfield, for instance, they have nothing to say. They never been to those places. So anywheres are more considerate about the metropolises of the world than they are concerned with any common people who are not necessarily living in the biggest towns and cities. So they know nothing about people from small towns. And there is really this divide between the world media, who are all living on this metropolitan lifestyle, and there is really something as a hate against their against their fellow citizens who are not living in those metropolises. So, and in the same time, they have global sympathies to, for instance, Londoners, Singaporeans, and so on, Singaporeans and something like this, to the people of Tokyo or something like this. And that's possibly this divide. It's possibly the only conspiracy theory that is a reality. Do you have any person to train speaking in foreign languages, live or by internet? Yeah, many. Yes, I am, but mostly in writing. Not so much, because I'm not a big fan of, besides here, I'm not a very big fan of those video discussions, because on Facebook, for instance, because they are of far worse quality also than here, but also I prefer to have this possibility of conducting several talks at the same time, and I have those columns, and in one column I'm discussing something in Polish, here in Spanish, here in in German. That's no bragging. It's just normal life. So yeah, and I have many acquaintances from the world of historical reconstruction and reenactment, and also some more academic contacts. Yes. What do you think about the leftist chaos in Sweden's attitude to the conservative way of child education? Well, I think the leftist chaos in Sweden is going to the end, I think, because they have stopped massive immigration. For instance, during the immigration crisis of 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, they have accepted the whole of the body of 60,000, which is not such a small number considering the number of Swedes, but it's probably comparable to the almost 1 million that was accepted by Germany, and to the 30,000 for the Danes, for Denmark. But it has little to do, I think it has little to do with the education theory and bringing up children theory in Sweden. I think because Sweden is self-defining as the scientific nation. So when you think about the most famous Swedes, they were all people of science, like Celsius, like Swedenborg, like Linné, like Nobel, Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, and they are pursuing the path of experimenting. And for a conservative soul, it doesn't matter if it's in Poland or in other country of Europe, for instance, it's something that really it's hard on nerves, but on their nerves. But it's just a different approach. So I wouldn't necessarily connect the immigrant chaos by being too welcoming to immigrants, which is by no means a typically Swedish approach. It's typical for all the Western world, as far as Western world exists, because the differences are more striking than the similarities. But I would say that it's something very specifically Swedish, experimenting and seeing what it will happen, and so on and so on. Well, about the ancient archaeological cultures in the Polish territory in ancient times, I am really none expert. Yes, I'm not an expert. Well, Kamil, I think because Kamil is asking whether the Jewish banks have supported the Bolsheviks, the revolution of the Bolsheviks, to destroy Russian Empire. I think that when you look at the best proponents of capitalism, and because capitalism is for me just another world of normal economy. So, but still, if you look at the side of people who are for the revolution and people who are against the revolution, then you will see Jews on both sides, and that's the truth. Because you will see on the side of normal Jews, you will say for instance, Benjamin Disraeli, the very prominent conservative politician. You will see the Mendelssohn Bartholdy, the very Protestant, very German, although Jewish by descent, German composer, and also to some extent a Protestant ideologue. And you will see many American Jewish businessmen who were by no means interested in revolution, neither in Russia nor in the States nor in any place. So no, I don't think so. When you look at the Bolsheviks or Bolsheviks, because there are two names in English, then you will see that most of those people are really the ethnic minorities in Russian Empire, but not necessarily Jews. They were often Georgians or Poles or Finns, and they have something in common. Yes, they were minorities, and it was the administration in the Tsar's Russia, in pre-revolutionary Russia. It was very limited, very narrow. So it was not possible to anyone interested in the administrative career to pursue this goal, because the jobs were given primarily to ethnic Russians. Some of them were even aristocrats, but so they were a little bit kept from the administration. So they were developing anti-Tsarist type of attitudes, and in the same time, the minorities were usually far better read. I mean, not read, but read. They were reading much more. They were reading. Some people were totally, unable to read and write in the Tsar's Russia. And because they were reading all those communist pamphlets. So that's the problem with people who are well educated but have nothing to do. Yeah. So that's the problem, not the Jew or no Jew. What's the George Soros's motives in creation of initiatives like Open Society? Well, I think that he is both a proponent of open market and without any barriers, which I'm not a great fan of, and he is also an idealist, because he was a Hungarian. He's a Hungarian. He was indoctrinated into being some sort of a Nazi boy or something when he was in his youth. So he's very much aware of the. He's so much aware of all those movements that could separate one society from another. Then I think it's like a string effect, right? So to just counter this, he's going too far in the other direction, in another direction, in the opposite direction. That's the problem. A music lover. Yes, I'm a music lover, but you. I am not a very big fan of Beethoven, so Moonlight Sonata is not something that would, leave me in O. I prefer Baroque music. I prefer Bach, and yes, some modern versions of playing Bach is interesting. Yes. What is my favorite adage? I'm afraid I don't know the word adage. Adage? What is adage or adage? Because in English language you never know, because when you don't know the origin of the word, you can that's interesting example. You can pronounce it either in Germanic way, like adage, or the more French or Latinized version, adage, adag, adage, adagi, something like this. So we never know. Lehman Brothers was not funded by Obama. Was because Kamil Halacz is asking about why Lehman Brothers Bank collapsed and went bankrupt despite funding from Obama administration. Well, it was not. That's the simple answer. He has implemented those funds after Lehman Brothers collapsed, and then it was because he saw that the domino effect could really finish the economy, much of the economy off. And he implemented those Keynesian ways of counteracting it. And by doing this, he was totally right. I am very critical about Obama, but this was done very, very right. And he also, with the cooperation of the Canadian government, Canadians had a back then already, very good regulatory bodies that have prevented Canadian economy and Canadian banking system from going to tubes like American economy and American banking system that the American systems lacked. And Canadian government was instrumental in preventing the collapse of some part of American car industry, like General Motors. And it's also something that should be remembered on the credit side for Obama, something that he really done well. Okay, so usually you had in uniform with last movie which you recorded, for example. Well, Przemysław, I have because Przemysław is asking why I had this uniform, although there was seemingly no movie, no video clip in which I used this uniform in the recent times. So yes, I use this uniform many times for both education purposes and cinema purposes. So you can find my, for instance, if you put Iraq Teatrum Illuminatum, you will find the massive usage of this uniform. Maybe you didn't see my movies about Iraq, made by moment, just a sec. This is the query from YouTube, of course, when you will find examples of use of this uniform and similar uniforms, especially as far as Iraq and Iraq wars were concerned. We were using those. It's possible that some Jewish families have a little bit bigger impact in the banking system. Yes, because they could not possess the, for instance, houses and things like that. So they were, in the historical perspective, they were concentrated on the movable assets, right? So like money and so on. Connect the dots. Maybe you will think about connecting the dots. Conspiracy theorists are always making these necessary links between events, and as a historian, I know that many events are just coincidental. They are just happening in the same time. What did happen to those 60,000 immigrants that moved to Sweden? Did they come back to their home countries? Some of them, yes. Some of this, yes. I know that some immigrants of Arabic and different Muslim countries descent had some problem to integrate in the German or Swedish job market, because they were expected by the countrymen to give them free stuff, free services, without being paid. For instance, I know the history of one Afghan immigrant in Germany. He was a master of sewing carpets back in Afghanistan, and typically Europeans would like to have something like this in house, probably, because they are very good carpets, right? Not maybe a Persian level good, but good. But he was not doing those in Germany, although he wanted to, because he was not doing it because his countrymen would require him, would force him almost by the pressure, by social pressure from this group, to make to make carpets like that for them for free. And that was a problem. So there are many problems that were imported by the things that are connected with how those sub-societies work. That's the problem. More than religion, more their, aggressiveness. Most have none. So, yeah. But it changed nothing. We shouldn't accept too many problematic immigrants one way or another. Still, yeah, but I'm only saying the fact that most of the problems are not really connected with their unwillingness to be integrated. Yeah. And some of them really went back. Yes, that's a fun thing, because they were asylum seekers. So some of them were. So, and some of those asylum seekers went back because they realized that their version of the truth was, crumbling. So, the worst flaws of nowadays capitalism is that the big corporations are avoiding taxes, and they are also plotting with some politicians, maybe not governments, but some politicians to escape responsibility for many things. That would be it, I think. Dragon Zone. Nobody uses the term adage for przysłowie. Proverb, for a love of God. Proverb. Normal word for przysłowie is proverb. Don't learn unnecessary words. But what was the question about those adages, proverbs? I don't even remember by now. I have no opinion of the new government in Israel. I think that the opinions that it would be very radically left-wing are exaggerated, and I think that not much will change, because even the left in Israel are not as crazy, because they cannot afford it. Because if they commit a real mistake, then they are all doomed, right, by the surge of the surrounding Muslim countries, which are all still hostile to Israel, although they have some sort of relations. But so the left will behave not so much different from the right wingers. It's not so. Kamil is asking about central banks. Are they public or private properties? It's not so simple. Many central banks are theoretically private entities, but they are working in conjunction with governments. That's the for instance, example of the early and this basic Dutch banking system, the Bank of England in Britain, and the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank in the States. And some are more clearly state governed and state owned. It's not there is no general rule. You must remember that although the strata of society, the level of society, are taken by different entities, those entities can be totally different. For instance, in France, the trains and the gas, I mean the natural gas things, they are all state owned, and in Italy they are all private. So that's like day and night, right? Like earth and space. I cannot really say anything in favor of Hungarian culture. They tire and bore me. They have a Martian language which nobody understands. There is no similarity between this language of Hungarians, and they are also in the same time not learning foreign languages. Only 1/5, 20% more or less of Hungarians can communicate in some foreign language. That it means that they are all mute Martians, because you have the same percentage in Italy or England, but they are at least speaking with, in case of Italians, some understandable language, and in case of English, international language. So no problem, right? With Hungarians, I cannot say this. No, I am also not a big fan of goulash. I am more a beefsteak kind of guy. Good night, Przemysław. What has Mickey to do anything with it? My favorite proverb? I'm not really thinking with proverbs, but I like this jeszcze się taki nie rodził, co by wszystkim dogodził, tak? Każdemu dogodził. Po niemiecku to jest to samo. Allen Menschen recht getan ist eine Kunst, die niemand kann. This is a very typical situation, that there are most of the very known proverbs exist in many languages. It's like with jokes. You remember when I was presenting jokes from Russia, Ukraine, France, America, and so on? Sometimes they overlapped, right? So that's the same with proverbs. Ukrainians or Khmelnytsky's army killed many Jews because the whole system of credit was in the eastern Poland and in the parts of Belarus and Ukraine that was owned by and controlled by Poland or by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. They were the custodians of, they were the creditors, the custodians of debts. They were creditors. So, those people, I mean, the people who were, the Khmelnytsky's army consisted of, were often totally owing much money to Jewish creditors. So they were to some, we can say that by murdering them and by persecuting them, they were escaping their the responsibility, the responsibility to pay back the credit, right? The money they borrowed. The same was happening, by the way, in the French Revolution, when they were burning all the documents in which the credits, the amounts of money, the credits were described, and those records were all destroyed by the rubble, right? So by the revolutionaries. And by the peasants who just seized the opportunity. It was not necessarily being revolutionaries themselves. I think it's a totally improbable situation, a full war in Europe. The modern type of warfare is generally being becoming too big to swallow. So there is the constant race of military equipment, both seen as aggressive weapons and defensive weapons, and this race is because if you were living in the times of Stalin, for instance, the Germans have attacked Russia without knowing if they can take Russia. They were thinking they could take Russia. Today we have satellites, and the weapons are known of one country are known to another country, so they can pretty much say if they can win the war before the war is started. So this and also atomic weapons make the war between the powerful countries of today very improbable, very improbable. So you must remember that although Mr. Bartosiak, Mr. Sekulski, they are all capitalizing on fear-mongering, right? On scaring you, that war is very improbable. What is probable is another Crimea, another Georgia, another small-scale proxy wars, in which you have bigger powers investing in some parties or partisans on guerrilla members or something like this in the smaller countries. About Old English, about Anglo-Saxon language of the early medieval times, I can only say that it was more Danish than English, when more similar to today's Danish. The Danes today, they can very easily, no problem, they can very easily read, for instance, the old poem Beowulf from 8th century. No problem here, right? The English, they understand nothing because it's more close to Scandinavian. That's the problem. The Anglo-Saxon, even the old Anglo-Saxon, is very often described as something less a Western Germanic language. In my opinion, this is what I just said about the Danes being able today to read Beowulf and texts like this proves that it was more Northern Germanic language, and it changed under the influence of the French and to some extent of the Dutch to more, partly Romance language, partly Western Germanic language like Dutch. No, it's not. I know that Stanislav Bartosiewicz. Who is Stanislav Bartosiewicz? This is only the okay. You are discussing with each other. Europe will not be flooding with immigrants. I would be very much astonished because look, European Union even, although they are all lefty and crazy and so on, but they are not suicidal crazy. They have paid the Turkish government, and the Spaniards have paid, separately. They have paid and equipped the Moroccans. So we are paying, as Europeans, we are paying to Moroccans and to Turks to stop the flooding. So I understand that we are, mistrustful of the Western Europeans, and we can be, and then because they are too open for our standards, and we prefer immigrants that could, integrate more easily, like Ukrainians in Poland, given our common Slavic background, right? For instance, the Spaniards, they also prefer Romanians. For instance, the Romanians they are, becoming Spaniards very, very, very soon after coming to Spain. They're integrating on a wonderful level, so at a wonderful rate, no problem. So I think no, the probability that we will have more problems with immigrants, no, I think not. We will be stuck with the problems we have now, I think. Mickey Mouse was not a very small guy. Mickey Mouse was only a little bit shorter than Goofy, and Mickey Mouse was probably like 140. so Mickey Mouse was a gentleman of the South, and a very serious person when you think about it. So it's idiotic to call something Mickey Mouse meaning tiny. They clearly, I have written a book about Walt Disney. I know what I'm saying here. Audiobook. Why Soviet Union? What? Well, Soviet Union, as the Americans, used the German technique to build weaponry, but they were more dependent on German scientists. But the Americans were also, because some of the scientists were coming from the Reich before the war. Lending money on high percent, you mean? Being a creditor is only the weapon when there is a sucker who will take the credit which is not suitable for him. So if somebody is stupid and taking more and more credits without any hope of being able to pay them back, then where is exactly the creditor's fault here? I think it's perfectly fine when the smart-ass creditor will, make a fool out of people who are drowning in debts and taking more and more credits that they are unable to pay back. I see no problem here. Don't you like capitalism? What's wrong? Stanislas, improve. Raise is more just it's lower, and then you raise it, and it's more higher. But polepszyć, improve. Well, in the free society, you must also because look, Google user, because you Google user have written, Mr. Napierała, how can a liberal person be unsure about mandatory vaccinations? The answer is, for the sake, no, I disagree, because there's a safety precaution. There's a safety thing. It's not like we are putting more, taxation on people's backs for fun. There is no like, oh, you must be Catholic, or you will be put to death. There is no rule. Those are the rules, the stupid rules. The medical rules, the safety rules, which are really safety, we can be demonstrated as safety rules, are not contradictory to liberalism. They are contrary to anarchism. And there are many libertarians and other anarchists who masquerade themselves as liberals. So I have no problems with mandatory vaccinations. I think we will be forced to do so by the reality, not by men, by reality. For instance, now in Poland, for instance, as far as I know, Prime Minister Morawiecki is promoting vaccinations, and it's very fine. But President Duda is appealing more to the Confederacja voters who are against vaccinations. And this is, I think, just damaging to the health of society. But I guess some people will die, and well, and they will make those vaccinations mandatory after the first people will be die on this new variant because of those new variants of the virus. Whom from the intellectual background of civic platform and law and justice you value the most, and why? I think good policy, good politics, and good policy, because policy is more like one person policy, one person's actions, and politics is the whole world, right? Of making policies. Is more about good ideas, not about persons, not about. I can point out people who are behaving rationally most of the time, but then they were doing some very serious negative stuff. For instance, when Trump was introducing many very good reforms that have improved the state of America's economy, for instance, and it's unquestionable. He helped United States greatly, but he also denied the problems which were coming with the virus. Of course, he changed his approach in time, and he really did everything he could to provide the vaccinations, the vaccines, but it was a little late, and he lost his credibility. And so I like Trump, and I think he's a wonderful guy, but I have problem with this, and I think that he lost elections because of this. So people have a little bit forgot about the improved state of economy, because the virus was also ruining economy, so it wasn't so visible anymore, the good elements of economy going up. And in the same time, so I cannot really point some person always. It's not so easy. And for instance, I disagree most of the time with Emmanuel Macron, but I can also point out some things that he did right. That's the real politics. That's the real policy also. That's the real politics, first and foremost. Kamil, Rockefeller is a whole family, because they have, due to the antitrust laws, they had to divide the whole firm, the whole company, in many small entities. So which Rockefeller, first and foremost? Yes, this is the most famous and most affluential, most rich family in the world, but no member of that family is especially rich. They don't make the list of the first 100 richest persons, I think, any of them. The problem with Jaruzelski and the first Solidarity movement politicians, it was that they were inexperienced in policy, and they really made the situation possible for foreign companies to buy out our factories, our machines, for very small amounts of money, and that's the real problem, and not what Rockefeller or Jaruzelski said or done or did, but the problem with Soros and Jeffrey Sachs and Mazowiecki, Bielecki and Geremek and so on. That here is the problem. Here is the Hund begraben, as the Germans say. Jerry Mouse. I don't know Jerry Mouse expression either. Yeah, most of the time South Americans are treated very good in Spain or Italy, yes. And there are many of them, especially in Spain, of course. And what's very interesting is that there are many immigrants from Italy in Spain. When you encounter some immigrants which are not clearly Arabic or something in Italy, that will be probably Albanians or some Slavs. But and there are not many of them, because Italy is not a good country for huge masses of immigrants, because Italy is a geriatric economical society. That means that they are geriatocracy. It means that all interesting jobs are occupied by old people. And many Italians, younger Italians, of course, they are going to find job in Spain. And both Italians and South Americans are treated very well in Spain when they come to work. No problem here. Although Spain has also the big, big level of worklessness, but there's no problem in Spain, because you have strong families and they support each other and they can live with each other, and the whole system is not collapsing, although the problem exists. So in Italy it's not so easy, although we associate very strong family relations. Italy is number one when it comes to struggles, I mean physical, with fists struggles, sometimes with the result that the woman is pushed out from the window, which is something unheard of in most of the countries. In Italy it happens because you have a real power struggle in the families and between the wives and husbands. So in Spain it's easier to be immigrant in general, because they have far less stressed social situation. My grandfather was fighting the Germans at the Battle of Bzura, and he went to the. You can read about him in Wikipedia, and he was put to the Oflag, which is the prisoner of war camp for officers, because he was a lieutenant of reserve, and he ended up in Oflag in Murnau in Bavaria, and spent the whole war there before he was liberated by the General George Patton's Third Army, American Army, U.S. Army. Yeah, vaccinated people can spread the virus too, but getting ill, getting sick, is also economical burden of people for the people and for the medical service. So, what's your point? That's the problem that will not go away. Now, I have a Brandenburgian Prussian some genes in my family, but it's more about 19th century. So yes, here in Poznan, in Grand Poland, in Greater Poland, we have many people who have some German or Germanic genes in their well, systems, biological systems, or family traditions, which way you would prefer to put it. I think Donald Tusk have he have offended Kaczynski many times already, but he has not presented any different version of future yet. If he does, and when he does, he has a shot. But before that, I don't think so. And I also think that having Tusk here will result in the crumbling of the voter base for Hołownia. So I think that the opposition parties, even combined, can have again huge trouble of winning against Kaczynski and Law and Justice Party. I hate Switzerland because Switzerland is a country that sends absolutely no cultural signal, and I hate that. I hate the cultural waste. Those are French, those are Germans, and those are Italians, and those are some Italian boors pretending to have a separate language which they call Retromanian. And I don't like pretending. I don't like pretending being someone who doesn't exist. I don't like pretending that you are somebody you are not. And the Swiss, the Belgians, they are doing exactly the same. They are doing exactly this, and I don't like it. That's just the way it is. I don't like it. I also don't like separatists, because what you are separatists. Separatist of what? If you are a Catalonian separatist, then you what? You are against Cervantes? You are against Lope de Vega? We are against Pablo Picasso? Pablo Picasso maybe was a Catalanian, I don't know. He was a communist, so he could be a Catalanian, but I don't think so. So, what you are against of? You don't want to pay taxes for Madrid? So we want to pay taxes only to Barcelona? And by the way, the Catalans all still think that they are the most important pillar of economy, and they are not. The things are changing, and Barcelona is going to tubes, and economically, the rest of Spain, some of the other regions are taking control of the. So they are not the richer uncle who is robbed from his money anymore. So. Yeah, Jerry is small. Jerry from Tom and Jerry cartoon is he's more animated film. Is rather small in comparison to Mickey, because Mickey is made after the size of small but still grown male. So yeah. We are all Poles who are practicing English speaking capabilities and abilities. So what's wrong with this? I'm removing this stupid part. Mm-hmm. Google user, I am considering banning you from these discussions for good. So just think if it's worth it. Yes, I think Confederacy is standing for the Russians. What's the left? The main body of opposition with Civic Platform, Platform Obywatelskie, standing for the Germans. Yes, and what's wrong with that? That's natural to some extent. It's perfectly natural that being surrounded by more powerful countries and the influences of those countries and all those states, you will have within the body of your state, of your country, you will have parties who are interested in cooperation with those countries. The only problem is that the Germans are not inclined to share the know-how with us, and they are also no experts in atomic energy on anything interesting. To be sincere, they don't have they don't have nuclear energy. They don't have things like that. They don't have much know-how to share with us. The Russians have none whatsoever. Well, maybe if they will be able to, I don't know if the Russians are still making new nuclear power plants. If they are, then maybe it would be something interesting. The main problem with the Russians is that they are thinking that the Poles are to some extent, well, not even to some extent. It's the Polsza nie za granica, right? So it's normal. It's normal for them to think that we are some element of their bigger body of Russians, of Russian nation. So yeah, they just want to swallow us, right? That's the problem. Yeah. So that leaves the American, right? So only the Americans can really do something for us, right? To supply us with, provide us with natural gas and other things like that. I think it's a wonderful thing. So when you compare those three possibilities to be pro-American, pro-German, or pro-Russian, I think being pro-Russian is suicidal. Being for the nation of Poland, I think being pro-German is naive and stupid and not very, cannot guarantee much in the future. And being pro-American is a good way. But there are some problems in realizing this because in putting this to action, because for instance, because Morawiecki, the prime minister, he has stated that his idea was to combine the cooperation, economical cooperation with the Germans, with military cooperation with Americans. So he is not enough American, not enough pro-American for my tastes. And all this said, I think that well, I'm culturally, I am more German than American. I like. Ich habe die deutsche Sprache besser. I prefer the German language and so on. I think that German culture is more interesting than American culture in many respects, but it doesn't change anything. When economy rules is one thing, and cultural things are. I also like the Russian culture. You know that I also speak Russian. Что я говорю по-русски тоже. Нет проблема. Нет проблемен. Yeah, it's hard to move from one language to another, but it's still worth it. It's still worth trying. And please don't dismiss those. It's good for the elasticity of the brain to also be able to put, to make discussion, to make discussion make conversation in another language. It's very rewarding. It's also making the brain more elastic, and it's a good thing, more flexible. And then when you will be learning also different stuff, which has seemingly nothing to do with languages, you will, like, I don't know, being acquainted with some political systems or some scientific stuff, then you will see that it will make those things easier. So learning languages is not only some I don't know how to put it, some game for memory or something like this, or some unnecessary rival. It's very, very important. It's very rewarding. Okay, so okay, so just think about what you are writing, because there are different. For instance, when you take a look at the channel which is run by Lepszy Commentator, for instance, his idea is that all comments are yours. He often says that. He always says that at the end of his clips. That the comments are as usual, or as always, yours. That means he's not interfering with those comments. But I don't think so. I am, as you know, deleting the comments which are derogatory, stupid, or full of ill will. I don't accept those. So just think, I always treat you with respect, and I am very happy to share my knowledge. And there's also some remarks that you provide which make me think deeper about some things, which I also appreciate. But please think about what you say, and don't take your frustration on me, because I will not stand for it. Right? Okay. So okay, since the list of questions seemingly stopped, I think we can really part in good humor. And we will talk next week. Next week it will be, as planned, Polish discussion again, Polish language discussion, and then we can make like every second or every third discussion in English. We'll see how it functions. But next time we can do it in Polish, and then we can switch to English from time to time. There's no problem. I would also to make, for instance, in the nearest future, one discussion that is in more British language too, for comparison, if only, which is also fun, because fun is more important than you think. Fun and realizing your, being different than others, being, pursuing your own happy thoughts and interests. It's more rewarding than making only what other people tell you to do, and so on. So yeah, for fun is very, very important, remember. Okay, thank you and good night, everybody. So have a good night's sleep.